Good morning. My name is Chris Adam with Youth Pledge for Employers, and I'm delighted to be joined by Anton, the Managing Director of AVW Controls. Hello, Anton.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
Yes, I'm not too bad. Yourself?
Good. Yeah, no, all good. Yeah.
Good. Thank you for giving up your time to speak to me this morning. And I guess my sort of start of a turn question has to be: can you tell me a little bit about what AVW Controls does?
Okay. So AVW Controls is we design and manufacture control systems to control scenery mostly for theatre, television, concert, trade presentation, that sort of thing. So it's usually moving motors, hydraulics sometimes. So it's not lighting or sound, which some people think it is. It's the moving of various pieces of scenery for shows and theatres, buildings, that sort of thing.
That's just really interesting. It's one of those businesses that when you say it, I'm sort of like, well, yeah, I guess someone has to be making that, but it's not something where, unless you said so, I was a bit like, oh, yeah, of course that business exists. How did you sort of, tell me a little bit about the history of the business? How did you sort of find this sort of part of the market?
Okay, well, originally I was in the Air Force originally, Royal Air Force, and when I left there, I was looking for a job, obviously, and the first job I got on leaving was working for another company doing this exact same work, and we did, Phantom of the Opera and all sorts of projects way back in the sort of 80s, 90s. And then I struck out on my own business in 1996, carrying on basically the same kind of work. So I fell into it completely by accident. I had no particular intention to do stage automation, just something that sort of fell into. I had every intention of being an electronics engineer from a very early age, but no intention of working necessarily in what you might call the arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we talk, you mentioned some of the different sort of purposes for the controls there, and I'm guessing with a lot of different performances and productions, the stage automation requirements are always very different. So I'm guessing this is a role where, as I say, you've got, do you have sort of similar systems that you have to put in place? Is it lots of bespoke systems depending on the performance and the customer?
Okay, yeah, both actually. So we make bespoke systems where that's required. So often build systems that are going into a building will be bespoke. We've got a control system that can be adapted, varied to different situations for show work. But having said that, every single control system is different. Ultimately, you don't make two the same ever.
Which I guess that must be one. Is that something that sort of you sort of like about the sector and the industry, is the fact that, as you say, sort of, I guess it's always different. I guess from an engineering point of view, it's always a different challenge that you have to tackle, something, a different problem to solve.
Yeah, different problems, different challenges, and you can then try out different solutions. I don't mind pushing the envelope every now and again as to how we achieve things. Sometimes it works and pays off, and then you start using that, becomes your new de facto way of doing that particular dealing with that particular problem. And sometimes they're not so good, and you think, okay, won't try that, won't do that one again. But yeah, you have to be careful. You don't push the envelope too much too often, because otherwise you're going to end up with control systems that don't work, or unhappy customers or whatever. So, but yeah.
And you spoke there sort of about, as you say, sort of continuously sort of learning and sort of developing things. If I go back to what you said about how, as you say, sort of you set up your own business, as you say, you sort of struck out and had a go at doing it by yourself. What kind of skill? Obviously, that's a sort of completely different challenge to, as I say, being within another organization. What kind of challenges did you face setting up your own business, and what kind of skills did you actually have to learn along the way that maybe you didn't think you'd actually have to learn to get it going?
Okay, so I already had the skills in place to be an engineer, but starting out a business, you suddenly have to sort of think about budgets, money, things like that. Make sure you don't run out of cash. You have to think about employees and their welfare, and the law regarding their welfare, and the law more generally, safety regulations and all that sort of thing. You have to think about more. Yeah, so there's you probably more than I appreciated when I first started a business. You end up sort of becoming an accountant and all sorts of other skills you never thought you'd ever really need.
Yeah. And I guess if we look at to learn all those different skills, as you said there, as you say, you have to wear an accounting hat, you probably have to wear a marketing hat, you have to wear, as you say, like an HR hat. Like, are there any personality traits that you think you had that sort of served you well to actually take on those sort of skills and learn all those, learn all those different skills and embrace those challenges?
Well, I like learning, so that's helpful, I suppose. I'm fairly calm, not much panics me or anything like that, so I guess that's a good personality trait to have. I'm good with numbers, which I would be as an engineer, but it also helps with the finances, etc. So I guess I've got some inbuilt qualities that are helpful, and probably some that are not helpful. I possibly worry too much, but there we go. Yeah.
I think worrying too much, I mean, as I say, it keeps you on top of things, doesn't it? I guess, as I say, there's nothing wrong with maybe doing a bit of overthink or worrying, because it makes sure that you are paying attention to different parts of the business. I think when if it comes to your finances, it's probably better to worry about them too much than not enough.
Yeah, definitely. You certainly have to keep an eye on it, that's for sure.
And sort of, we've spoken a little bit about how within the business, as you say, sort of everything's different challenges. So I know in advance there'll be no such thing as a typical day. I will understand that there'll be no such thing as a typical day. But maybe could you explain to me a little bit about the process? So in terms of, if I'm putting on a production and I require some different automated control systems, how does the process work from me sort of, contacting you about it to getting them in place for the production?
Okay, so generally what would happen is a production manager will call me, and I know most of the production managers sort of in this country and in the West End and all the rest of it, so, and they know me. So I usually starts with a phone call about what they want to do, and timescales and budgets and things like that. That might then involve a meeting face to face with the model of what they want to do with the designer. You then have to turn the idea of an artistic brief, if you like, into an engineering brief.
Yeah.
So then I have to start working out sizes of motors, how much power, how much speed is required to move various elements in the show, how much power that's going to take out of the building, that sort of thing, because sometimes when we're moving sort of heavy pieces very fast in a theatre, you might find that the theatre hasn't actually got enough power in the building to do it.
Yeah.
Then I design it all on paper, all on computer. It then gets built in my workshops. It then gets taken to the theatre, wherever that may be, sometimes abroad, often abroad, in fact. It then gets installed in a very short space of time. You then have a technical rehearsal where they put in all the scenes and everything, but this is without actors on the stage. Then the actors come along and they rehearse with the equipment, and then you have an opening night, and then they're on their own after that, unless there's a breakdown or a problem. So that's kind of the process that you go through.
It's really interesting, and sort of, I guess, going back to when we talk about skills, when you're talking there about sort of having to meet with, as I say, sort of, representatives from the theatre, production designers, getting everything sort of shipped abroad. There must be so many different parties that you have to communicate with, and people with probably different personalities and backgrounds. I'm imagining, sort of larger than life characters from the theatre, as I say, people with sort of lots of international experience from maybe the logistics and shipping side of things. So I'm guessing sort of communication and interpersonal skills are actually quite a large part of the role as well.
Yeah, you're dealing with a lot of different people with lots of different skill sets. So you've got the designers and theatre directors, etc., are quite arty, usually not very good at maths, that sort of thing. Appreciate some of it. Then you're dealing with production managers who have got timescales and things to deal with. Then there's shipping, even children. I mean, sometimes in the theatre you've got to interact with children because they're part of the show. Even animals sometimes. So not very often, but so all sorts of different kinds of people you have to deal with. Plus, of course, then there's suppliers, tax authorities, all kinds of people. Yeah.
And if in a sort of theoretical scenario, imagine sort of there was a young person who was coming to apply for a role within an organisation. Obviously, I know that there are different routes they can go down to get the engineering skills required, but as a sort of core person, what kind of personality traits or even experiences that they might have at a young age would you maybe be looking for that would make you think, actually, if we got you fully trained up, in all the engineering skills you needed, you'd be a good fit to work in an organisation like this?
Okay, well, I think it's true that a lot of engineers are sort of born almost like some people are born to be nurses or doctors or politicians or musicians. I think a lot of engineers are born, and they're people that are curious about how things work. So they're not just satisfied to switch on a radio. They're going to have the back of it to find out what's going on inside, and that's the kind of, I guess, the personality trait that you need to be an engineer. You need to be interested in things, and how they work and how they go together and that kind of thing. And I think if you've got that will keep you interested. If you're that kind of person, then that will keep you interested. When I started out, I started out in the RAF. I did an RAF apprenticeship in avionics, which wouldn't be probably the guaranteed route into what I'm doing now. I imagine you would probably need to go to university and do an engineering degree, basically to end up where I am now. It's not how I ended up here, but I suspect that's what you probably have to do these days to get to where I am now. Yeah.
And you've spoken a little bit about sort of, say, your sort of journey, your background, and how you, as you say, you fell into the industry. And this is my final question, really, and I've asked this to all the businesses I've spoken to, which is, if you could go back, Anton, and sort of speak to, say, a 16, 17, maybe even 18-year-old Anton, based on sort of the experiences you've had from, working for other people, setting up your own business, maybe successes you've had, mistakes you made. What's the one piece of career advice you'd actually give to your younger self?
I think I'd say, actually, keep doing what you're doing. It's going to be okay, because as I said earlier, I wanted to be an electronics engineer from a very early age, as long as I can remember, and I feel I've achieved that. And I wouldn't change that, because I think that's how I was born to be. So I would just say, stick with it, you'll be fine.